I've got your back. Promise.
All right. What's going on, everyone? My name is Deontay, but you can call me Emperor. As you can see, we have a basic gameplay guide for the main character today. I am using the female counterpart, Jita, so we'll just call them that for this video. Jita is what you would call a all-around character in this game. We have plenty of damage, buff, and debuff skills actually. This video should be relatively short anyways, as they are a bit more simple to understand than most of the roster in this game. What I'll be going over is the current loadout I have on her. Then I'll go over her basic gameplay on the practice dummy. Then we'll go over the skills and what I recommend using. Afterwards, I'll go over my recommended sigils along with my build being used on the practice dummy once again. Finally, we'll give this build a test drive on the Fire Dragon. So let's go ahead and get this started. Now, this is the current setup I have on Jita, so let me quickly go through these. And this is the current Overmaster I have on her. And this one will definitely never change. So yeah, let me switch out this weapon and take off all my sigils for you guys. Alright. As for Jita, we will quickly go over the light attacks and how they look.
It's working.
Like so. But you'll see that we have this thing called the arts that just went up a level when I did that full combo. We will go over that in a second once I go over the heavy attacks. So for the heavy attack, if you tap it, it simply just does that. But you can actually hold this
Go for broke.
and it goes up 2 levels. And then once you release it, it does a lot more.
Running. Like what you see?
And on top of that, you see our arts gauge also went up again when we did that. Now we go back to our light attacks. You'll see at the end, there's a combo finisher that you can do.
Yep, this'll do. Like what you see?
And that will also raise your gauge. Now, with the power raise, you can see that it's kind of slow. So, what you can actually do for that to make it faster is do what we did earlier with the light attacks and then the combo finisher. And when you use your power raise, it actually makes it go faster when you do your combo finisher beforehand.
Like what you see?
And now it just went a lot faster.
Score one for Jita.
Now, that's not the only thing that power raise can do. When I go over my sigils and everything, you will see that this becomes a pretty important part of your playstyle when you play the main character in this game. So let's go ahead and get to the skills. Now, I did say the main character pretty much has everything in their kit, so we do have a lot more skills than usual. But I'll still try to make them simple as possible. So our first skill, which is a damage skill called Decimate, as you can see in the showcase video that they give us, it slashes a lot of times. This skill is relatively good for just overall DPS. Now, we also have a damage skill right here called Armor Break. It is a damage skill that you use to lunge at enemies from afar, but you can debuff them when you actually hit them with it. And you debuff them with a defense down, and depending on your arts gauge, that can go all the way up to 25%. So at arts level 4, you can do a defensive down by 25%. We have this other skill right here, which is a buff skill called Phalanx. And this one grants you damage cut to both you and all your allies on field. This one works a little bit more different than the other damage cuts that are in this game, because this one in particular, because we have an arts level, this damage cut goes all the way up to 70%. Now we have another skill here, which is for healing, Panacea. I might have pronounced that wrong, but it doesn't matter. It's essentially a circle of healing. What makes this skill so good is that Not only is it a wild effect when you actually use it, but you can also hold this and place it wherever you want to heal people. And on top of that, this also works with the arts gauge or arts level. Now we have another damage skill, which is called Rain of Arrows. It does exactly what it says in the name. You rain down arrows from above. But the best part about the skill is that just like Armor Break, this also is a debuff that you inflict as soon as you hit them. And you debuff them with an attack down, which can go all the way up to 25% also. On to our first debuff skill, we have Miserable Mist. It essentially casts a bubble over the enemy, which you can hold down, by the way, to aim wherever you want to. This does both what Armor Break and Rain of the Arrow does in one skill. Now, we have a buff skill right here called Rage, and this grants an attack buff to the entire team. This can go up to a 30% attack boost. Now, we have another damage skill called Overdrive Surge. This skill right here, you jump up and do an axe kick, and like it says in the description, it does a lot of stun, which makes this a pretty good skill if you're running a lot of stun sigils or a stun weapon. Now, we have another healing skill actually. This is called Clarity. This one works a little bit more different than Panacea because you're removing all the debuffs on your allies, but not only that, when you heal with this, although it's not instant, but you do gain your HP over time when you use the skill. Now we have another damage skill right here, Regenlave. I probably butchered that name as well, but I don't care. This one is a ranged damage skill and it fires projectile. Doesn't show on video of what it does when it's maxed out with the arts gauge, but at level 4 it does a lot more hits than that single projectile on video. Now we have a debuff skill right here called Stall, and this inflicts slow on your enemies. Having slow for an extended amount of time does help out a lot on most fights. Now, to your surprise, we have our third healing skill on this list called Revive. It does what it says. It revives your enemies immediately when they're down, and depending on your arts level, they gain more HP. Now, another buff skill called Veil. This is a pretty good skill because this grants you debuff immunity. Debuff immunity is extremely good in this game. All debuff immunity does is it just nullifies any status ailment you get hit by, which is very good in game. Really in mid and early game too, because there are a fair amount of enemies that do a fair amount of debuffs in this game. Now, another debuff skill called Dispel. This one does the opposite. When you cast this on an enemy, you remove a buff from them. Now this does damage as well, and the damage is dependent on your arts level. Now we have another buff skill right here, Conduction, and this shares our SVA to our allies. The amount is dependent on your arts level, and for reference, there isn't many that can use a skill, so this skill can come in really handy for boss rushes. It is very good. Now our final skill, which is the buff skill called Substitute. This does a fair amount of stuff. So firstly, we gain a defensive boost, and depending on our arts level, it can go up to 50%. Not to mention we gain Substitute, and then our allies gain Covered. And all this skill does is the damage our allies take is converted to us. Now, these are the skills I usually use, which are 3 damage skills and 1 buff, which is Regenlave, Decimate, Armor Break, and Veil. This is dependent because, for one, I'd already mentioned that we're going to fight the Fire Dragon, so it makes sense to have this skill on. But my last skill is always dependent on what I'm actually doing it on the quest. Now, going on to her sigils, I'll say get Fearless Drive first for one of her personal sigils, because her skills become extremely consistent if you have this on, because it reduces the skill cooldown whenever you gain the arts level, which you will constantly do if you're in combat. Now for the warpath, which is called Fearless Heart, this grants enhanced damage whenever you go to a higher arts level, and it can cap all the way up to 10%. Now I do run quick cooldown on this to at least level 30, because having quick cooldown is pretty important on a character like this, because the main character is sort of heavily depend on their skills, which is why they have so many. So yeah, quick cooldown is important. So it'll make a lot of sense why I will also recommend Cascade, because it pretty much does the same thing that Fearless Drive does, except it's passive whenever you just hit the enemy. The rest of these are absolutely personal preference, or just making sure that I get my attack up high enough for some other sigils like Berserker Echo, which is heavily dependent on getting 25,000 attack. Now, the combat rotation is literally the exact same that I showed earlier, except after you use your power raise attack, all I do is use 1 or 2 skills, and then I just rinse and repeat. So it'll look something like this.
It's working! Get back here! Like what you see?
And then you just go back to the same thing.
No running! No running!
And you can see how fast the skill comes back, because I literally got decimate back immediately. But the main reason why I rotate off of the skills is to make sure that my arts gauge stay up to 4. I essentially keep up the arts gauge to level 4 only so I can make sure that I'm getting the maximum effect out of my skills, essentially. Because the skills at level 1, like decimate, looks like that, and then like level 1 regulate looks like this. Not much going on here, so that's why I keep Mark's gauge at level 4. I believe all we have left is to fight the fire dragon, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, I did mention that the arts gauge is pretty important to our skills, but for my debuff, I'm going to do that immediately, because I know this guy loves to use his fire.
Well then.
Not to mention, he literally dashes straight into it, like so.
Like what you see? Get back here!
Just back up a little bit.
Let's stay cautious.
And go ahead and let him do that.
Yep, this'll do.
Oh, he dodged away as soon as I did that attack. That's unfortunate. The only thing annoying about this boss is that he constantly repositions. Like that. Like he did it as soon as I mentioned it. That's funny.
Yep, this'll. Preparation
Like like look at this. Just repositions immediately. I couldn't even get out my full sentence before he did again.
Like what you see?
Though I'm pretty sure I won't be able to kill him in time. But let's get that percentage down at least a little bit. Yeah, I can look 6% left. There you have it. Now, that'll be the end of today's video. I have decided before the DLC, I do want to get a guide out for Cagliostro, Sandelphon, and Id. Likely in that order, actually. So I might do it in that order. So this should release on Monday the 29th for the main character. And then Cagliostro on Thursday, Sandelphon on Saturday, and then Id on next Monday. Hopefully. We'll see. Anyways, I'll catch you all later.